So I have managed to record this video without any original audio, and I'm going back and dubbing it. So if it seems a little different than my previous videos, that is the cause. But I did finish up the missions with the exploration agent. All the missions I did were basically identical. It said that there was different types that I was exploring, but because you didn't do anything inside the sites, there wasn't any practical difference. You can also see some of the skills I was training, including Shield Operation and Caldari Frigate 3. Those were bigger milestones. And I got a new ship, Huron, as a reward for a mission. It's definitely nice to be collecting all these different ships and to get some variety and options in exactly what I'll be flying. You can see it's a little more combat oriented with the 5% bonus to kinetic missile damage. It also gets a bonus to the scan strength and survey probe flight time bonuses, so it's very much meant as an exploration ship. So I also, if you look there in my inventory, see I have a limited social augmentation chip, something along those lines. Anyways, it is an implant that gives me a +1 bonus to my charisma. Now, all you need to use an implant is the cybernetic skill trained to 1, and then you just simply have to pause your skill queue because it's going to have to recalculate all of your times, so it won't let you plug anything in while you're training, but just hit the pause button right there, and then you can plug in the implant. Once you plug it in, you can't unplug it. You can put a new one in its place. So I could, if I got a +3 charisma implant, I could put that in, but that would destroy the +1 implant. So be careful before you use it. Make sure it's what you want to use as opposed to maybe selling it and spending some extra money on a +2, let's say. Now, at this point, I should have turned on my skill queue to resume training, but I didn't. It was shortly after the video I realized my mistake and I went back and started my skill training again, but don't do that. Now you'll notice my clone is a 900,000 skill point clone. That's what I'm pointing at right there. That's the other way that you can lose the implant is if your pod gets blown up. After your ship gets blown up, you're left in space in a pod. If that pod gets blown up, then you will lose your implants and you will lose your current clone and any skill points beyond what it's rated for. I have far fewer than 900,000 skill points, so that's not a concern for me. You can see I just left my ship there to show you my pod. You can voluntarily not be in a ship and just be in your pod. I recommend against flying between stations and systems like that. If you get caught in a smart bomb, it's gonna kill you. You're gonna lose your clone and have to buy another one. You're gonna lose all your implants, and it's generally gonna be a less than fun experience. So do be careful, do avoid flying around in your pod if at all possible. Plus, they warp very slowly. They enter warp instantly, but at that point, they're actually traveling very slow. So it seems like it would be good for traveling, but they're actually not. Now that I have finished the exploration agent, I double click on him or start a conversation with him, and he won't do anything for me. So we're going to start some combat missions because we have not had a lot of combat, and we have 2 military agents, and we haven't even done a single mission with them. So we'll start up with that. Reward will be a new hybrid weapon, a Gatling gun, and some more antimatter charges, which actually running a little low on those, so that's not a bad bonus reward. Now the railgun is a long-range version of the blaster that we're already using. They're both hybrid turrets. They use the same ammo types. They use many of the same skills. They fit on ships very similarly. They operate similarly. The real difference is a railgun is longer range, less damage by a little bit, longer range by a lot, and slower tracking speed. So most of those differences are pretty obvious that I can shoot things that's farther away, and that seems good, but it's actually worse at hitting things that are close up, and not just damage-wise, but we have to worry about tracking speed with all of our weapons that aren't missiles. Tracking speed is that relative speed from left to right or right to left of a ship from our perspective that we're trying to hit. And imagine if you're standing right on the side of a road where cars are going by at 50 miles an hour. Try and move your head left to right and keep up with that car that's right in front of you, and it's going to be really, really hard. Well, blasters are really good at that left to right movement. Railguns aren't as good. So if things are really close up, they can have trouble with tracking. Now compare that to, say, an airplane, which is traveling at 550 miles per hour, but seems stationary because it's so far away. So railguns really want things to be at their optimal range, a little bit farther away, which for these small frigate-sized ones with really no skills on my for my character here, and using antimatter ammo, which reduces it further, is still only 5,000 meters, so it's still a pretty relatively close-up weapon, but definitely different than the 500-meter optimal range of our blaster. I'm also going to go ahead and pop in an overdrive injector here. That just increases my speed passively. It doesn't use up any resources on the ship other than shrinking my cargo hold and wasting a low slot, but as long as we have it, we'll go ahead and fit it. I'll put in the afterburner, which gives us speed, but does have to be activated and burns up capacitor. It's an active speed module. We have the small shield booster, which is going to repair our shield. Again, an active module that uses capacitor when we go to run it, but it's going to be providing a lot of our tank. We're also only using one of our two high slots. I simply don't have another weapon and don't think it's worth spending time and ISK finding a weapon and fitting it and generally dealing with that when the one weapon is going to pop most things pretty instantly, given that these missions are basically sub-level 1, easier than even a level 1 mission, and level 1 missions aren't exactly the most challenging thing in the world. So I will go ahead here and warp to our dead space. I do have to say I like the look of it here on there. Caldari ships are unique looking, I'd say, from all the others, in that they always have these long, spindly, in these cases, like vertical looking wings. They get even more extreme when you look at a ship, say like the Raven, with all these just pieces that look like they would snap right off, jutting out of it, really showing off that they're shield tanking ships. The ships themselves are fragile, they're relying on those shields, is sort of how they're intended to be used, which is why there's always going to be a lot of mid slots, but very few low slots. Mid slots are where shield modules are generally going, whereas low slots are where your armor tanking modules are going to go. Although the ship doesn't look quite as cool as it should, I have my graphical settings way down in this video, thinking that that was going to help some of my Fraps performance issues I was having and trying to boost my frame rate. I increased the quality in some of my later videos coming up, so look forward to Eve getting prettier if you're watching my videos, especially if you don't play Eve. It is actually a much, much better looking game than what you're seeing here. But I'm going to go ahead and move in on this first target, start shooting at him. You'll notice I didn't turn on my afterburner um, to burn it on that target. That did save some capacitor. The ship does have a very limited capacitor, and if I was going to need my shield booster, I'm only going to be able to get a couple of cycles out, a few cycles out of it, even with full capacitor. That I think I might have just forgotten. But you'll see as I'm moving in on this target, if these were ships capable, if the enemy ships were capable of shooting me at range, that's the downside of blasters. Although they do huge DPS once you're in range, some of the highest DPS weapons in the whole game, you've got to travel in and get there first. And during that travel, your enemy, if he does have longer range weapons than you, is getting to shoot at you without you being able to shoot back at him. And if he starts flying away, it can really extend that time. And that's why that afterburner can really be key to get in there quicker. Later, you can also, with more skill, start to fit micro warp drives, which are like afterburners on steroids. But they do have limitations. You can't use them in most dead spaces, being the main one. So a little bit more of a PvP. I'm sorry, yeah, PvP item. They also make your signature radius absolutely massive, which can be an issue on a frigate depending on the situation, but the speed boost can be critical also. So you'll see when I cycle the shield booster there, just for two really short cycles, was able to kill a full third of my capacitor in a matter of 3 seconds, but fortunately these NPCs are doing almost no damage whatsoever, so the shield booster really not necessary. That is the problem with active tanking. Active tanking being having those modules that use capacitor, as opposed to a shield extender or along with shield hardeners, more passive tank. At which point your shield's only going to get its passive recharge, but you're hoping that your shield being very, very large, you're not going to have to repair it. So making it large instead of making it repairable. It's two different methods to tanking. So we see that my mission does appear completed, it is a good idea before warping back sometimes to make sure you got that little check mark box, the little check mark to show that your mission objectives were completed before warping back and that you don't need to pick something up from a can or fly to some specific point in the mission or do something else, because I cannot tell you how many times I have gone to fly back to a station just to realize that I didn't complete the mission the way that I thought I did. But we will go ahead, fly back, turn in this mission. Was definitely a nice warm up, I guess I'd say, for my first military combat mission. Definitely not the most challenging missions coming out of our military agent. The new player experience, they're definitely trying to ease you into that, though. Me knowing exactly what to be clicking on and to be figuring out that I have an optimal range. This is great for a new player to experiment with that type of thing and make the mistake of not getting into their optimal range, but even without running any modules or paying attention, you're pretty safe to play with all of that stuff. And then the game's going to show us about the repair shop. If I had taken armor damage, and at this point I haven't trained any skills for repairing armor, and I don't have any armor repair modules, we could use the repair shop to repair our ship's armor and hull if we actually took hull damage. And also the weapons, if you're taking hull damage, your modules can become damaged. The repair shop is able to fix those too. But there's a motion prediction skill book, which is exciting now that we just got a railgun and we're going to have those issues. Oh, and actually, let's take a quick look at the Condor here. With it is getting a missile bonus, which I've been wanting to switch over to missiles. So this is definitely a nice ship. And we can see it has 3 high slots as opposed to the current 2, meaning it can fit a large amount of weapons. It does only have 2 medium slots, so still some limitation there, and only the 1 low slot, but not much different than our current ship, other than getting that extra 3rd high slot and 2 missile launcher hard points, which is nice. But we do see here that I'm about to get granted a motion prediction skill book, which increases your ability to track hostile ships, and that increases that tracking speed of the weapons. So right after they give us the railgun, they give us the skill book that helps make up for that limitation. But we do see the frigate skill bonus there of light missiles and rockets, kinetic damage, and a 10% bonus to their velocity. Definitely some nice bonus. Missiles are the only type of weapon or ammo that has a velocity rating. All weapons are instant except for missiles, which have to travel to their target. So all damage is delayed, which is a definite downside, but missiles always hit for at least a little damage, which is pretty nice. Although if a ship is moving quickly, that can reduce the damage, and if it has a small signature radius, like we talked about earlier, that can also reduce the damage a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and undock. And the tutorial's giving us some very basic information about our weapons and mostly stuff that we've talked about before. I do recommend that right-clicking and making sure that you're reloading your weapons and that sort of thing. Do keep up on that. There is nothing worse than flying into an encounter and realizing you haven't reloaded recently. But we actually see our 4 different types of weapons there in addition to the hybrids and missiles, which we've talked about. You've got projectiles, which are similar to the hybrid turrets, but just not. And then you've got lasers, which use crystals for their ammunition, but in practice still pretty similar. Um, and I go ahead and I reloaded my ammo there, but there's nothing worse going in and seeing you've only got 1 round in each of your weapons, and it's a full 5 seconds to reload. So to go to shoot and then suddenly have that 5-second delay in a higher level mission can be very difficult. We also see the locking range limitations there, that I've got to be within 37,000 meters, 37 kilometers, before I can lock these targets, so we'll have to start approaching them. The flashing yellow around the icon up there in my overview means they are in the process of locking me. That yellow will turn red once they've established a lock. It's not a quick process because I am just in a frigate, so I am pretty small. Oh, I'm sorry, that means that they have me locked. And we see the white icon there signifying that I've now locked them. And we'll do the same dance we did before. Orbit a target, shoot at it till it blows up. Orbit the next one, shoot at it till it blows up. Definitely not a terribly complex process. Ah, okay, no, I was right. That was just a very long locking time that now they are starting to turn red. That may actually be some type of bug or something. I don't know what that is. Or perhaps it's not because they haven't shot at me yet. These ones doing a little more damage. We see a little bit of a dent in my shield this time, although still clearly a very minimal amount of damage being done to my ship. Even just my passive shield recharge is almost keeping up with the damage. We also see how all of the ships you're going to fight aren't necessarily there at the beginning. Of course, we started with 3. I've blown up a couple, and I've still got 3 hostiles. The trigger for those hostiles has very recently changed, I believe with Inferno, the most recent EVE expansions, and when they changed that. It used to be that in each group of ships in a mission you'd go into, one of them would be the trigger. And of course, I'm going to try and check these wrecks to see if they have any loot, but these early missions, not many of them do. But it used to be that in each group was a trigger ship, and once it blew up, it would queue another wave. That was problematic in that if it was large groups of ships that you were fighting, lots of small ships as opposed to just a few small ones, there was a not bad chance that if there was, let's say if there's 10 ships and you just got unlucky and the first one you hit was that trigger ship, suddenly you'd have 10 more ships on top of you and you're fighting, 20 ships. That could be overwhelming, as opposed to if you got really lucky and you could fight in 2 separate groups of 10, which is so much easier, and that caused the mission difficulty to be very variable and hard to control. So they've gotten rid of that for the most part, and it's when you kill the whole group or a certain percentage of the group is what will trigger the next wave. It's also possible for the waves to simply be separated physically within a mission, and you have to move group to group, but that if you try to bypass a group and say blow up a tower, that's the objective for the mission, without blowing up those individual groups, they will all swarm you at once, which sometimes is a strategy. If you're, just trying to boost up your standing in a with a new corporation and you're flying around in a battleship doing level 2 missions, although you really wouldn't want to do that. That would be very inefficient. What you could try to do is go straight for the tower, blow it up, get everything to aggro you and jump on you all at once, and have them come to you instead of going to them just to save some time. Frequently, ships that, again, have more power than is necessary to complete a mission that want to use shorter range weapons or maybe Dominic's can be a great mission ship, as a drone boat will still carry at least one long-range weapon for the point of aggroing those different groups. Although the actual range of the weapon doesn't matter, as long as you can shoot at them, even if it's impossible to hit them, can still trigger that aggro. But you don't want to completely waste that DPS, so if you're having issues with getting things close to you, then as long as you're going to fit a weapon, a long-range one can make some sense. So we get to complete our second mission with our military agent. Go ahead and request our next mission. Luckily, they've all been right here in the same system, which is nice. And we're going to get a reward of a couple of rocket launchers, which is perfect timing now that we've just gotten granted the Condor, I believe it was, that does have the 2 missile hard points, so we could combine it with one of our hybrid weapons if we decide we want to go that direction. Have 500,000 ISK, so we're starting to make some money very slowly. Of course, we're spending it as quickly as we can get it on additional skill books at this point. Still not enough money to really be going out and buying modules, and certainly not enough to be buying ships. Really, our first ship purchase is probably going to be a cruiser when we're ready, because they're giving us plenty of frigates to fly around in for these. But eventually, when we want to move on to some level 2, and maybe you could do some easier level 3s. But that's it for this video. Thank